I have the good fortune of being able to open us with what the UN opens the International Day of Peace with, and that is the ringing of the peace bell. And that peace bell has a very special story. And I am going to actually tell it very quickly and then move into the ringing of the peace bell, because I was gifted this book by the daughter of the man who actually had the passion to build the peace bell. He had a message after having been a soldier in Burma when he almost died. And he'd heard a temple bell come back when he woke up, knowing that his soldiers had all died. He was the only survivor, but that bell rang in his heart. And he said, it should be a bell of peace. We should know that there cannot be war. And in reading this story, it reminds me of why the Global Silent Minute was founded, and that connection, that deep knowing that war is something we need to abolish. And he had this in his heart, and it specifically turned into action after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He saw even more destruction there and became involved before that, even with the founding of the UN. He knew that they needed a bell to call for peace. And he had visited Pope Pius the 12th. He had visited the leaders in different countries. He even got coins from stewardesses on his way to Berlin, and he got coins from from a Soviet and from US soldiers to put into this bell. And what isn't known very often is we think about it as coming from the coins from children. It also came from recycled weapons and swords. These were put together and cast in Japan, carried by a cargo ship that went through the Panama Canal. It ended in New York. It came with a specially created bell tower, the little thing we see over it at the UN. This bell came with so much love, but it also came with 2 piles of dirt, one from Hiroshima and one from Nagasaki, that are buried under the peace bell in the United Nations garden. This story touched me so deeply, and I just am so sorry we didn't get to hear it from the author of the book. But another time we will record that. It just means so much to hear the bell that is only rung by the Secretary General once a year on the International Day of Peace. So I'm going to invite us now to start our day. Actually, before I do that, I want to read the quote that he had to tell that he wanted to do it for children. And it was just to say that children around the world gathered coins to make the peace bell. After all, it was my wish for children to hope for peace. I responded in a voice, yes, I know your kind heart. You only wish for children to love and protect peace. So the message also on the bell, there's a little piece that calls for peace in the families. This bell has such a rich history. So let us hold this family, all of Japan, all of those who contributed to this amazing bell in the 50s, as we hear it rung by Secretary General Guterres in the UN garden on the International Day of Peace. Yes, let us just listen in our hearts and feel the peace.
Peace is never a given. It is an aspiration that is only as strong as our conviction and only as durable as our hope. It can take decades, even centuries, to build peaceful, stable societies. But peace can be squandered in an instant by reckless, divisive policies and approaches. 75 years ago, the United Nations was founded with the overriding goal of preventing war and promoting peace. Since then, we have deepened our knowledge on how to fulfill that noble mission. We have solid evidence that human rights, respect for the rule of law, access to justice and opportunities for all are the building blocks for peaceful communities and societies.
Today we stand separated and masked. The pandemic has brought unexpected levels of misery and hardship to many. But it is the most vulnerable who suffered most and still suffering, both in conflict and at the hands of this disease.
Thank you, everyone, for holding the United Nations International Day of Peace in our hearts as we begin this day to celebrate it for all around the world. I turn it back to you, Tez, and to Avon.
Thank you so much. As we continue to bring more people into this beautiful room that we have, welcome to all of you as you come in. This is a very auspicious day. And as you heard, if you've been with us, we started our day in a good way with elders from Japan and other Japanese friends conducting prayers of the ancestors. And now we are fully moving into the UN International Day of Peace by the ringing of the peace bell. Monica, that was just beautiful. Thank you so much. So Peace Day was established by unanimous United Nations resolution in 1981. And it was a globally shared date. That was the intention for all of humanity to commit to peace above all differences and to contribute to building a culture of peace. While it was started by a handful of people, many of them here today, it is now celebrated by millions of people around the world on September 21st. And as you heard today, this day is about sharing the story of the International Day of Peace, which we call Peace Day, with many global leaders coming in to share stories of the history, evolution, impact, and relevance of Peace Day today. So as I said, many of those leaders are here now in the room, and some will be coming later. So we hope that you'll be able to stay with us. It is an unfolding of the wisdom, the courage, and the efforts of many to come together to create this International Day of Peace. And we are honored to have one of those original leaders who was there at the beginning, Avon Mattison. Avon is the co-founder of Pathways to Peace, and she, along with other peace leaders, worked with the UN and initiated the International Day of Peace, or what we call Peace Day. Thank you, Avon, for being here, and thank you for being my personal mentor. As I've said earlier, my name is Hezekiah Gabriel, and I'm the executive director of Pathways to Peace. So I stand shoulder to shoulder and work hand in hand with Avon every day. And I'm very grateful, Avon, for that. So Avon, welcome.
Infinite gratitude to everyone. We will, because my camera is not working, Tez is going to put up a slide. My apologies. To our Japanese colleagues who are still with us, and to everyone who is participating now and who will be watching this later. Infinite gratitude for participating in all the ways that you have throughout all the years as peace builders. We have gathered today to speak about the origin and the evolution of the United Nations International Day of Peace, which has also come to be known as Peace Day. We all follow the pathways of those who have come before us, and part of what we will do is honor all of those as we begin to speak about the extraordinary, historic adoption of the resolution by the UN General Assembly of the United Nations in 1981 for the International Day of Peace. What is so important is that this resolution occurred during the Cold War, and this was the first time that all nations unanimously agreed to a day that was universal, that committed nations to peace and to all peoples above all differences of any kind. The origin of this occurred along several lines. Many of us had held an idea of the United Nations establishing a universal day of peace, but there's such a thing as a convergence and divine timing when an idea becomes manifested. Part of it was with the meeting that occurred shortly after the University for Peace in Costa Rica was established, largely through the efforts of Assistant Secretary General Deborah Moldel and the then president of Costa Rica. And it was a meeting held by the International Association of University Presidents. Others involved were, again, Robert Mueller, Dr. Robert Mueller, Assistant Secretary General of the UN, Ambassador John MacDonald, the permanent UN ambassador from Costa Rica, Amelia de Barros, and conversations with Robert about the Hopi Prophecy, Hopi meaning the word for peace, and their idea that one day the prophecy would come to the glass house. This was from thousands of years ago. And that, of course, represented the United Nations, that there would be a day that would establish peace and that would become part of the legacy and the fulfillment of the prophecy. The original resolution that was proposed was that it would be called World Peace Day. It would occur on the 21st of September every year. And in order to get this passed during the Cold War, it was decided that the day would be the opening day of the UN General Assembly, which was not a fixed date, but it was always around the third Tuesday in September. So that was what helped get it passed. And also calling it the International Day of Peace, because this was incumbent upon the nations to come together and begin to work for a common purpose, which was for peace above the differences of all kinds, and to work in concert with the United Nations. This occurred through many people working with persistence, shared vision, patience, common purpose of diverse groups, divine timing, for the benefit of humanity and for the earth and for all beings and future generations. What is so important is the resolution and the wording of the resolution itself. Even though we weren't able to put in some specifics connected to, for instance, let this be a day where there is a ceasing of all forms of violence and a ceasefire that would also be a day for giving humanitarian aid to all of those in war zones. It was kept more universal, and this was actually a very wise idea because it allowed those who were involved with the divisiveness of the Cold War to agree to every single word in the resolution. This is another reason why it is so historic and why it is so even more important and universal throughout all of these 40 years. And this year represents the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the resolution establishing the International Day of Peace. The resolution that you are seeing on screen, one of the significant parts of that is that it calls upon not only all the United Nations as an entity, but also all member states and all of humanity to promoting the ideals of peace and to giving positive evidence of their commitment to peace in all viable ways. This allows, by the way, a great interpretation of different approaches to peace at all different levels. Another part is that it asks that this day, the International Day of Peace, shall be devoted to commemorating and strengthening the ideals of peace, both within and among all nations and all peoples. And that is of great significance because it allows the role of civil society in every human being in all organizations, whether they be regional, governmental, or whatever, NGOs, CBOs, whatever they are, to participate in their own way to peace above all differences of any kind. And this was at the 77th plenary meeting on 30 November 1981. Truly an historic moment. And I'm now going to speak about how this one day and how a minute of peace expanded into very quickly Peace Weekend, Peace Week, Peace Month, and then into a movement, a global movement toward building a culture of peace for the benefit of all and future generations. And that includes our relationship with the earth as well. I called a dear longtime colleague and friend who is Robert Miller and asked him what was happening on the International Day of Peace for 1982 with the United Nations. And he said that the only thing that was happening is the traditional minute of silence that begins the UN General Assembly every year in September. So the decision was made that Pathways to Peace would initiate something called the Peace Wave. And the Peace Wave is a minute of silence, moment of peace at noon in every time zone. And we collaborated with different organizations in San Francisco, the birthplace of the United Nations. And everyone agreed that they would participate in this and spread the word to all of those that they knew. So at noon, which was at the opening of the General Assembly at the United Nations at 3 p.m. East Coast time, we established the beginning of the Peace Wave. And we also agreed that we would do this every day on the 21st of September and be able to connect in a simple act of peace through this Peace Wave with different people throughout the world for this 24 hours, so that would it link humanity in this sort of unitive action of peace. And this could be done at any level, in any way, in any manner that people chose. And we also suggested that this be done in a way that also brought in other members of the community, if possible. And that began the Peace Wave, which actually that year was on the 21st of September in 1982, kind of a divine coincidence. In 1983, we understood that there was still not much occurring within the United Nations or anywhere else. So we began in San Francisco to work with our sister city in Assisi, Italy, and to begin the building of an event that would be in 1984, that would be on the International Day of Peace, that would be intergenerational, intercultural, interfaith, and that it would honor all the different constituents within that community or that city and involve them in the planning process. So we began in 1983 convenings that brought together the mayor of San Francisco, the board of supervisors, representatives from different organizations, including business, the military, humanitarian organizations, and on and different religions, on it goes. And what was so extraordinary was there was such a readiness for people to come together who ordinarily would never meet, and they met together with such goodwill and loved that there was a purpose that they could share in common and co-create in common. And that led to what was going to happen in 1984, again in San Francisco with our sister city of Assisi, Italy, and different people and United Nations organizations and all of that, associations rather, began to connect with their sister cities and with their networks around the world. And an event happened in San Francisco that was all done by volunteers with the support of the city of San Francisco, the mayor of San Francisco, the board of supervisors, Parks and Recreation, and just on and on it went. And it was so extraordinary that there was such support and diversity within that. There was a flag ceremony, there were speeches by various people representing different organizations, and there was a vigil at Grace Cathedral that began with the Indigenous ceremony for the International Day of Peace, and then involved people from all different pathways of different religions and faiths to be able to present what they were doing in prayer and ceremony at Grace Cathedral for this vigil. And you will see from the slides that are being presented that there was great diversity and that most of the attendance was broadcast by television, local television. And then what also was so important was that at noon, there was the peace wave. And even businesses stopped what they were doing. The entire government of San Francisco stopped for a minute, and CARO-N TV and NBC affiliate broadcast the Minute of Silence. It was the first time that a Minute of Silence has ever been broadcast over radio and television, ever. And the local newspaper, the leading newspaper actually in San Francisco, said it was the silence that was heard around the world. And that has continued to be carried on. And then fast forward to 1986 at the United Nations, where it was also the International Year of Peace, proclaimed by the United Nations. And there was an invitation by the Office of the Secretary General that representatives of the United Nations non-governmental organization, certain organizations be invited, along with representatives from certain cities that had taken part in the International Day of Peace beginning in 1984. I forgot to mention, by the way, in 1984, this was again before internet, and so only by voicemails, by faxes, by telephone calls, and by letters did the International Day of Peace in 1984 was participated in by individuals of over 70 nations. 3 entire nations dedicated the entire day to the International Day of Peace, including Costa Rica, Canada, and Italy. And there were some others that I've forgotten at the moment, but that became also historic. And at the end of that year, we presented the activities that had happened during 1984 to the Office of the Secretary General. Returning back to 1986, the Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General Robert Mueller, and the President of the General Assembly, with the ringing of the peace bell, began a very special ceremony where they inaugurated something called the Peace Messenger Awards. And these Peace Messenger Awards would go to non-governmental organizations and to cities who had already made the International Day of Peace so significant. And the city of San Francisco was one of the cities awarded that. And Pathways to Peace and several other organizations were given that award. And that became a separate kind of supportive movement for making certain that the International Day of Peace became more recognized and commemorated within the United Nations system itself and within humanity at large. And the International Association of Peace Messenger Organizations and Cities became very, very active for many years until it was ended somewhere around 1990, I believe. What is so important now is that what began as 1 minute and 1 day of peace by 1986 had become 1 week of peace and 1 month of peace. And that has turned into a global movement where it is self-organizing. It is something that has involved citizens and all nations involving themselves in whatever way they have deemed appropriate to engage in and make certain that the International Day of Peace is the annual highlight day. And this has been positioned now since 1984, actually, as the annual highlight day where we mark our individual and collective process toward building a culture of peace in all viable ways. And then on that day to honor and celebrate that. And then on that day to make a commitment above all difference of any kind to again be able to advance and increase our commitment so that it becomes enough of a day that Peace Day is every day so that we can change the course of history from a culture of war and violence to a culture of peace. There are many other years to point to, and others on this call, on this webinar will do so. I will conclude with a beautiful quote from Nicholas Roerich, an extraordinary peace builder, philosopher, and so much more than that. Positive creativeness is the fundamental quality of the human spirit. Let us welcome all those who, surmounting personal difficulties, propel their spirits to the task of peace building, thus ensuring a radiant future, end quote. May peace prevail on earth. May everyone be a path to peace building, to build a culture of peace for the benefit of all and future generations. And may the spirit of peace be in our hearts and spread throughout the world, not only on the International Day of Peace, but on every day, Peace Day every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avon. Truly, 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 you live the quote you always use, which is together we can and do make a difference. And that difference has been felt by our room stewards and our presenters that are going to be coming up for the rest of this day to speak about the history, to expand on their perspective on the history, the evolution, the relevance and the meaning of Peace Day. So thank you very, very much. And I am at this point going to bring back in Monica Willard, who is one of those individuals that lives the day, Peace Day every day. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tez. And Avon, thank you for that beginning. It was such an important reflection on how this day began and where in our hearts we carry it. I am Monica Willard. I represent the United Religions Initiative as an NGO representative to the United Nations. And I have had the joy of working with Avon for so many years because the International Day of Peace was near and dear to my heart when I started at the UN as a representative for the Ribbon International in 1991. The bringing of the Peace Bell was still a pretty small event, and it brought together the ambassadors for kind of a perfunctory meeting to ring the bell. But as we got to know Avon, and I worked very closely with Deborah Moldel, for the 50th anniversary of the UN, Avon had a major event in June in San Francisco, along with the Bishop of the state of California, who held an interfaith gathering celebrating the 50th anniversary of the UN in June, was to mark the charter signing, because the charter was signed in San Francisco. So San Francisco has been tied to so much of the UN history. And so for this 50th anniversary, Avon gathered a children's event where Nina Meyerhoff also did a children's event that I attended. Deborah Moldel attended the interfaith service. That was the beginning of the United Religions Initiative, but it was also the beginning of people working together for peace and bringing in children, bringing in so many more things. And so after 1995, there seemed to be a real resurgence into how can we really bring people and make peace more visible. And the culture of peace started at about that time as well. And it all kind of merged together. And the UN came up with the idea to have 5 UN days that involved youth. And with this new thing called the internet. And the internet was going to bring people together in some kind of a way. And in 1997, when they were talking about promoting these days with children on this cyber school bus, which was a whole new format for the UN, Deborah said, if we want to do something on the International Day of Peace, we can bring the flags from then called World Peace Prayer Society, and we can have a flag ceremony. So in 1997, we had the first student observance of the International Day of Peace in Conference Room 4 with almost 900 students. Avon flew in from San Francisco. We had invited Mrs. Anand to join us. The peace bell was not rung on that day exactly, because at that point, the peace bell was only rung on the opening of the General Assembly. And so we rang the peace bell created by melted down weapons that was part of the World Peace Prayer Society's flag ceremony. And Avon rang that bell with Mrs. Anand that day. During this first student observance at the UN, I'm sorry. It is so important that this student observance also brought together students from around the world with a poem. And it's a long poem. It's an internet poem that different schools wrote in different versions. So we kind of started with the technological event and moved to an annual observance of the International Day of Peace with students, mostly local, until last year. And Zoom caused us to be even that much more spread out globally. But we have the International Day of Peace being celebrated on September 17th at the UN with the student observance this year. But today, we are looking back a little bit as we go forward. And there are a couple of key things between 1997 and today that I just want to bring in at this history time. On September 7th of 2002, after the International Day of Peace jumped around as the General Assembly moved from the third Tuesday opening in September to various dates, depending on whose calendar it worked for, a second resolution, an amended resolution carrying the love and the intergenerational support in the wording from the first one, came to add 2 important elements to the International Day of Peace. And we have to thank Jeremy Gilly, a filmmaker from the UK, who was determined to not only put a set date on the International Day of Peace so that people around the world could really observe it, but to also call for a ceasefire and nonviolence. So the second resolution had 2 important additions in this amendment. the set date of September 21st, starting in 2002. And that's an important thing to know, because September 11th, 2001 was the opening of the General Assembly. 2011, 2001 in New York City was also 9/11. So the irony of that being both the last day for an unset day for the International Day of Peace, and the fact that the International Day of Peace bell is rung to call for the end of war, we have a big commitment. And this commitment is going to be shown as we continue this morning, because as we call for celebration for the International Day of Peace, we call for a ceasefire. The resolution calls for it for a day. Let us join in Avon's clarion call of Peace Day every day for a ceasefire globally. It is so important. And in this year in particular, it's the first time I have seen the Secretary General really call out the International Day of Peace to call for a ceasefire during this COVID time, because of the impact of war and conflict and what that means to health and humanity. So let us join together as we hear the amazing stories of people who have been celebrating the International Day of Peace for 40 years. This anniversary is 40 years old. November 30th of 1981 was when this resolution was passed. So this is our very first event to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the United Nations. And it could not have been started any better than by bringing in the ancestors, by bringing in the prayers, by sharing the peace bell, and by hearing the story of someone who helped the people who wrote the resolution. Avon, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because everyone in this room is connected to you in some fashion. Some of us have the good connection of a direct one. Others are one or two people removed, but the inspiration, the dedication that you have added, and the prayers, and that we are continuing in that tradition to make Peace Day every day. So let us enjoy this first 40th anniversary celebration and hear the stories of some of the wonderful people who are in the room. I can't see who's in the room, so I'm going to need some help. And Katie, you're going to have a big job here. I don't know if Deborah Moldel is in the room.
She's not yet.
Okay, then I'm going to pass it to Nina Meyerhoff, because you were there in 95 when we started working on these things. Nina, you were there in 97 when we had the first student observance, and you have brought students and been so dedicated to the International Day of Peace. Let us welcome Nina Meyerhoff, one of the organizers of today as well. But Nina, thank you.
So much gratitude, Monica. So inspiring. I could feel, the energy pouring out. Yes, the International Day of Peace was so important. And I go back to the 80s, and I can't even get the date straight anymore. But I remember that Avon was already thinking about peace messengers. And every time we did an event, she would call me and say, make sure you put the information about the International Day of Peace on the bottom of the paper, that we all would recognize it. And slowly, it became something real. And the first time the International Day of Peace, we brought maybe 50 to 75 young people from around the world to come together, and it was really in the General Assembly. And then we moved to conference room 4. And I remember The kids all brought sleeping bags from all over the world, Africa, Nepal, Australia, etc. And they slept on the floor of the UN school, you know? I mean, it was a big event and it was so important to all of us. And this one young girl, she was about 14 years old, came all the way from Australia and she fell asleep in the chair. I had to sort of knock her and say, it's your turn to talk. And I think the most important thing that we learned is that it was the first time in my experience that the young people really had a role in the International Day of Peace, peace messengers, the whole concept of that the voice of young people. And it was based on the rights of the children, the treaty, the children's rights. And so within that, it said that they deserved an opportunity to be able to participate in defining their own future. And so that's what the young people began to speak about. And then I started bringing young people from Vermont, where I live. And we used to take the bus, I think it was at midnight, to arrive 8 in the morning, dead tired. They'd change on the bus to get out. We'd meet Monica and Deborah and quickly be ushered into the UN. But it was exciting is beyond, you know, is inappropriate. It was beyond words, especially for these young people, because they had no idea, you know, how could they as one individual be able to walk into the United Nations and be able to be part of a global communication platform. So it was an extraordinary event. We also had kids come from many countries, and then we started bringing in refugee young people. And so the refugee young people started working and creating videos and doing local projects, etc. And for them, it was so important because it gave them a stage. You know, they had always felt like they were second-class citizens somehow, and all of a sudden they were up front. Yes, and so the whole process has been remarkable from a point of view of young people and how they're given a voice in determining their own future. Thank you.
Nina.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, that was incredible. And I want to say I was there for the 9/11 bell and I could feel your emotions, Monica. It was, yeah, I mean, to ring the bell and see Kofi Annan come down and tell us to get out of the UN, and you know, the contrast between the peace bell and the plane going into the building, my goodness, you know, but it was remarkable. And people ran downstairs into the basement area and across the street. I mean, it was, yeah, an important day in that it was contrast. It was so amazing. And I
Nina,
want,
I'm going to have to ask you to continue your story and invite anyone who can join us at 12:30 or a little bit later to hear more from Nina and youth who've been impacted by the United Nations. And we have a long list of people to get through. And so for all of you who are waiting to talk, we want to get you in. So thank you, Nina.
just tell one more story, because UNICEF was very involved in the International Day of Peace, and that's where the ceasefire began, because they advocated for children having a corridor, a safe corridor. So many, many stories, yes, and I'll speak later, and I am so grateful, Avon, so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. I saw that Deborah came into the room, but Dot is right here. So I'm going to do Dot first and then go on to Deborah, because I don't know if you can spotlight her right now.
Yeah, I think Katie, bring Deborah in this box and bring Monica in this pin also, please. Let's get the four of us here for a minute. Nina, you are absolutely on fire. It's so beautiful, radiating. So the International Day of Peace, I said to Avon yesterday in our planning, hi, Deborah. So I said to Avon yesterday, it was like the early 1980s. We were in Jersey City, New Jersey, just outside of New York. I think it was 1981, actually. And Avon telling me about this landing of this International Day of Peace. I was like, wow. let's give voice to the spirit of peace. How gorgeous is that? So over the years, as Nina has shared, so many things would happen. And Monica, I know you want me to mention peace teams, and you're going to hear from Jennifer Kim also with the Peace School. That was Deborah and Monica call and say, Dot, let's start peace team for the International Day of Peace. Okay, let's do that. So we started the education peace team, and I think David will speak about one of them, and media and business. It was just awesome as it continued to grow and expand and deepen. And Deborah, oh, God bless you. And both of you, Monica, you too. And remember the Share the Spirit of Peace Summit and the flag ceremony at the UN and so many things. And then we do receptions at the Nicholas Roerich Museum the night before the International Day of Peace. And people would come from all the various groups and civil society and Ambassador Chowdhury and Avon and everybody. So gratitude to all, grateful to be part of this journey and the sisterhood that is, what shall I say, heart voicing through this room this week. May peace prevail on earth. So much love.
Thank you, Dot. Thank you, Nina, for the amazing introduction. And for those of you who don't know Deborah Moldel, which I don't think anybody in this room doesn't know her, she is coming to us live from San Miguel, Mexico. Thank you for being with us, Deborah. You have been a co-creator for the International Day of Peace since I met you. And we started working together in 1995 at the children's event in San Francisco. So let's hear a little bit from you on the International Day of Peace. It's a joy to have you.
Oh, well, it's a joy and an honor to be here with all of you shining lights. And I see a lot of shining lights from around the world. So thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get on earlier and hear what's been said already, because I feel like I'm kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool. But I really, really want to share with you my story of getting involved with the International Day of Peace. When I was asked to represent May Peace Prevail on Earth at the United Nations in 1995, I had no idea what I was getting into, didn't know what the job would look like or how I would do it. But I was sent to have my first day at the UN during what was called a PrepCom. And that was a preparatory meeting for an international conference. And in town for that meeting was my mentor, Avon Mattison. So Avon took me by the hand and took me into the UN and showed me around. And she said to me, there are certain people that I want you to meet. And one by one, every one of those people appeared. And that was when I got my first inkling of the magic that was possible at the United Nations. Now, during this PrepCom, there was also an NGO group. So we're all NGOs, non-governmental organizations. There was an NGO group called Women in Spirituality. So I went to one of those meetings, and that's where I met the woman who was going to become not only my closest colleague, but my best friend at the United Nations, Monica Willard. And of course, Avon had told us about the International Day of Peace, and which really lit Monica on fire. And Monica eventually became a representative for Pathways to Peace. For me, the International Day of Peace was a perfect way to spread the prayer, may peace prevail on earth, because of the 12 noon minute of silence. So that seemed to me like a marvelous opportunity to invite people all over the world to join in this peace wave that would circle the globe, and not only say the prayer, may peace prevail on earth, but possibly plant a peace pole or gather at their peace pole that they had already planted and maybe was just kind of sitting there, and celebrate this 12 noon minute of silence. So I was excited about the International Day of Peace. And Monica and I planned an event in 1996 at the UN, but it was still kind of not large scale. Then in 1997, I went to one of the weekly NGO briefings, and there was a man from the Department of Public Information named Hassan Ferdous, who gave a presentation about a project he was excited about, where they were planning to invite children to the UN to celebrate 5 of the different UN international days. And one of them was the International Day of Peace. They were going to bring school children from New York. So I went up to him afterwards and I said, is there any chance that you would be interested in having the children carry the flags of all nations with the message, may peace prevail on earth? And Hassan said, I don't know, that sounds interesting. Let me set up a meeting for you with my boss. So I brought Monica with me, thank God, to this meeting that we will never forget with Liutha Almagari at the Department of Public Information, where they decided to trust us. And they knew that May Peace Prevail on Earth was a prayer. They were taking a risk, and they decided to try working with us. And that was the beginning of our experience with the student observance that has been held annually since that time. Monica is still working on it, God bless her. And we had many years of incredible partnership with UNDPI to co-create this event. They let us have input into the theme and the poster and various aspects of the event itself, which we helped expand over the years to include the UN messengers of peace who were coming to the UN anyway that day. And they weren't letting them in the meeting. And now they're a part of it and they love it, especially our beloved Jane Goodall, who's come every year. And the Secretary General's bell ringing. There was, of course, we couldn't have the students carrying the flags to the bell ringing because that would be a security risk. And finally they said yes, and they tried it, and it was beautiful. So over the years, not only has the student observance been an inspiration to the students who have participated, but it's been like a linchpin, a focal point for the International Day of Peace, which has expanded throughout the NGO community and into the world in so many beautiful and unexpected ways. And there were so many people who were a part of that. There were the NGOs in the meetings, like Michael Johnson and George Anthony, who brought his students every year, and Lisa Parker creating Peace Day Philly. And one of our unsung heroes was Bob Silverstein, who created the first International Day of Peace website for Pathways to Peace. And he said, you can't have a day of peace without preparing for it. So let's have a 100-day countdown. And eventually we lobbied for a message from the Secretary General for the 100-day countdown so that the nations could prepare for peace. So it's been a remarkable journey. We linked up with people like Jennifer Kim and others around the world who were celebrating peace and became part of the team. And now, through the efforts of so many different organizations, Rick Ulfik with the 11 Days of Peace, and I mean, it's just become what we dreamed of, which is a day that all of the people around the world who have a peace consciousness, a sense of themselves as citizens of the whole planet, could come together and focus our prayers and our intentions for peace all at the same time, as we do with the Silent Minute too. So I just want to express my gratitude to not only everyone who's been part of this journey, but especially to Avon Mattison, because she planted that seed so powerfully in our hearts that it inspired us. It inspired us every day in our work at the United Nations to really bring forward the International Day of Peace. And our beloved Monica did that at every meeting. No matter what we were talking about, Monica got up and said something about the International Day of Peace, because this kind of a seed needs watering, and it has needed every one of you. So thank you, everyone, and may peace prevail on earth.
Deborah, thank you. And I know you only did a touch of the tip of the iceberg of what happened for the International Day of Peace. And I'm realizing how many people we really want to recognize on this morning. So for those of you who had prepared long things, I still want you to be introduced, because you are core to making this team work. But we are going to be a little bit quicker than we might want to be. And we absolutely are going to need to do more of this to get this oral history for the International Day of Peace. Fumi, would you go next?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much, Monica, for inviting me. Everyone in this May Peace Prevail on Earth room, we worked so hard to bring this event together for you. Such a blessing to be with all of these pioneers and elders of the International Day of Peace that made the International Day of Peace possible over so many decades, especially our Avon Mattison, who was the first person that I ever met when I came out of Japan. That was in 1985, 1986. As you know, in 1986, it was declared the International Year of Peace. And that was the year when the May Peace Prevail on Earth International, previously known as the World Peace Prayer Ceremony, came out for the first time out of Japan. And Avon was our first friend that we met, introduced us to so many peacemakers. And of course, we connected to Pathways to Peace and learned all about the United Nations, the International Day of Peace through Avon. And she was such a, just held us all the way through the establishment of May Peace Prevail on Earth in the late 80s, when we became a nonprofit organization in New York. So we owe a lot to Avon, and of course to all of you who carried this, the spirit of the International Day of Peace forward, especially Deborah, who represented us for so many years at the United Nations starting in 1995. That's so incredible, Deborah. So much history, so much love, so much energy that went into holding this year after year, bringing our flag ceremony to the United Nations, sharing that love and peace with the youth of so many countries during the youth observance, and bringing those flags at the ringing of the peace bell, when the Secretary General will start the observance in the morning in the Rose Garden. Just so many beautiful memories. So thank you so much to all of you International Day of Peace elders. I'm so grateful, and we will continue our journey now. After reaching 4 decades, we are going to continue together to spread the message of peace. May peace prevail on earth through International Day of Peace. And let's remember, Peace Day is every day.
Thank you, Fumi. Fumi is now on the NGO Planning Committee for the International Day of Peace going forward. So we know that this is not only a history from the past and into the future. And I have the good fortune of introducing quickly 2 people who will be sharing their stories later that you really need to hear about. I'm going to first introduce Lisa Jennifer Kim, excuse me, from Peace Day Chicago, because Jennifer was part of the Peace Messenger program, and Lisa Parker and Lisa from Peace Day Philly, will be doing a program later this afternoon that you can hear more about cities' involvement in the International Day of Peace. So Jennifer, if you do just quickly say hello, and Lisa would follow her.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, I'll shorten up what I plan to say, but Peace Day in Chicago actually started in 1978. That's when the founder of the Peace School, with no connection to the mayor's office, asked the mayor of Chicago to proclaim Peace Day. And we organized the very first observance that year. Every year it's included a minute of silence for peace. We wrote to mayors and governors across the country to get their support. So really, I'm here because of the late founder of the Peace School, because he was an inspiration to live peace daily. And through him, I got to meet all of you, which was phenomenal. So as Monica said, I'll get into my story this afternoon. See you then. And also tonight, if you can stick around after the plenary, we're going to be showing our Countdown to Peace Day event that we did about a couple weeks ago. It was so fun. It was so moving. So I hope you can join in for that as well. So thank you, everybody.
Jennifer, before I turn it to Lisa, I think that all of us need just a little bit of a break. So would you lead us very quickly in the peace breath and explain just a little bit so that we can just take this minute together to anchor what we've heard and move forward?
Thank you, Monica, for that suggestion. Just calming yourself, closing your eyes if you like, and following the movement of your breathing. We let peace fill the mind and body, the heart, and let peace expand with every breath, touching the entire world. Let's bring our breath together. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, world. Exhale, peace. Inhale, world. Exhale, peace. Inhale, world. Exhale, peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Not only do we get to hear about peace, we get to anchor it together. And I am so grateful for you doing that for us in the middle of this. Thank you. Lisa Parker from Peace Day Philly.
So I learned about Peace Day in 2009, but it wasn't until 2011 that a small group of us gathered in Philadelphia with the hope that we could bring the International Day of Peace to our city. In September 2011, I went to the UN for the first time in my life. I was in my 40s. Though I was a social worker, I'd never actively engaged in social causes. I traveled to New York with our small group to witness the youth program for the UN International Day of Peace. And listening to Dr. Jane Goodall and other messengers of peace, my enthusiasm for Peace Day grew even larger. Back in Philadelphia, Peace Day Philly began our first year as an organization with 3 programs. Through the years that followed, we presented 12 to 25 plus programs annually. And in solidarity with other Peace Day initiatives and with the support of mentors like Deborah and Monica, I was fortunate enough to be a UN representative for May Peace Prevail on Earth and to become a UN representative for Peace Day Philly beginning in 2018. Peace Day Philly continues to build positive peace each year in Philadelphia and beyond, and our September 21st program has always included the Global Minute of Silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And our next presenter is someone we haven't seen in a while. He was part of the International Day of Peace NGO committee and co-chair, Michael Johnson. Welcome to this room. It's so good to see you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yes, good to see everybody virtually. And wow, I'm feeling a lot just sitting with everybody and your story. So my story began on September 11th, 2001. That event awakened my consciousness to begin to think about how I can work more to create peace on the planet. That led me to the Spiritual Caucus at the United Nations, that led me to the International Day of Peace. So it was a pretty wild ride for me for the years that I helped out with the International Day of Peace. But the thing that I feel was most significant in my experience was the level of cooperation that, because as we know, we all come with our own ideas or agendas or egos, but we come.
Michael, we can't hear you. I'm wondering if you'll turn off your
together
video
with the
so that
vision
maybe we could hear you
of how
better
to
without
create
that.
people. Okay. So what's going on?
Thank you, Michael.
I have a very unstable internet connectivity because I live in the country. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank
Still?
you. It feels
Okay.
much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so what I was saying is the level of cooperation that we experienced was incredible, and because of that, the International Day of Peace has risen to a actual global observation, and the minute of silence is I feel is the unifying event that happens. And one story that I want to mention was, and this happened mainly just through phone calls together, was I think it was around in 2006. We had Dr. Ari from Sri Lanka interested in observing the Peace Day there. And what happened was he was able to get the whole nation of Sri Lanka to observe the Peace Day, and there was 300,000 participants at the Capitol dressed in white observing the Peace Day. And that all occurred from a group conference call. So to me, that's the miraculous efforts, the miraculous potential that we have as humans when we come together and share our ideas and our passions. And yeah, so I want to acknowledge you all for all your efforts, and especially Avon, who was my mentor. And she had a lot of patience in dealing with me, which I appreciate, and I learned a lot through my association. And so, what I felt was my mission was, I was very mission orientated, was to stay with the International Day of Peace as a focalizer until it got to global. It was actually celebrated globally. And I felt that happened around 2012. And I felt, okay, my mission is over for that piece. And now I am focused on healing the wounds of Turtle Island with some native elders. But I still honor the Peace Day and promote it locally and celebrate the silence. So thank you all, love you all. And I feel good this morning seeing you all and hearing you all. Thank you.
Michael, we are so blessed to have you join us. Your actions did even so much more than what you were able to capsulize, because you also brought in youth from the Railroad Street Youth Project. You brought in a rapper who rapped for peace. You did so many wonderful aspects of building the program each year. You're still missed, but we love you, and we thank you for the foundation you helped us build for the International Day of Peace student observance. Thank you, Michael. Next, I get and blessings on all that you're doing, and we're there to help you too.
Thank you.
I'm also able to introduce another co-chair of the International Day of Peace and GO Committee, Sean Sweeney. Sean was bringing youth from 2003, when Jane Goodall was first the messenger of peace speaker. She was the first, that was the first year we brought Jane to the UN and the Messengers of Peace in 2003. And then Sean, your activity and the way that you have moved Roots and Shoots, not just at the UN, but in all of the programs with Jane Goodall, and highlighted her as a messenger of peace. We're honored that he's taking time from his vacation to be with us this morning. Thank you, Sean, for being with us.
Thank you, Monica. It's such a pleasure to be here, and appreciate everyone for this this program today. I'll just be brief, and there's so many things that I could say about the International Day of Peace, from Dr. Goodall's involvement as a messenger of peace, which we're so honored by her every year, to be so deeply involved in how since 2002, when she was named a Messenger of Peace, how she's called our International Youth Program and everyone in the Jane Goodall Institute network to honor and celebrate the International Day of Peace. Many of you know Jane's signature giant peace dove puppets that we carry on the Day of Peace as our big symbol, Jane's big statement for the Day of Peace. So much there in almost 20 years of Jane's involvement in the Day of Peace. The thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to the other stories from today was how wonderful a testament I think my story is in some ways to Monica and Deborah's commitment to the Day of Peace. I think I was there wrangling some young people outside the UN on the Day of Peace observance one year, and you just nabbed me off the street and totally brought me into the fold. And it was at a point in time when I think the UN was really starting to invest in bringing young people in and recognize the voice of young people. And certainly you were trailblazers in doing that with me. I think one of the things that I've observed in my time with the Day of Peace that's been so fundamental is that involvement of young people, and not just in a sort of ceremonial way, but in really fundamental ways. So it's been an honor to, over my decade with Day of Peace, to hold that space for young people and make sure that they are at the table and that they are being heard. I also think that one observation that I would make for the Day of Peace over the last decade is something that Dr. Goodall has really brought to the table, is how important peace with the environment is, and how appreciative I've been of everyone here in recognizing that as well, and doing so much to ensure that the themes for each year, for so many years, have woven in peace with the natural world, as well as animals, inclusive of animals. So that's been really important. Those two things, the walking the walk in terms of involving young people, and the importance of recognizing peace with the natural world, are really two major important things that have been fundamental for me in my participation, and what keeps me going along with this wonderful group. So thank you so much, everyone, for including me, and thank you for spending this time to shine a light on all the good work for International Day of Peace.
Sean, before I let you go, I just want you to highlight a couple of International Day of Peace countries that are being, or how many of the Roots and Shoots clubs are going to be doing the International Day of Peace, or have been doing it over the years. I mean, there are how many clubs?
Yeah, so Roots and Shoots has been active in over 140 countries around the world. And I know that, having processed many photos from around the world, there's that many that have participated in the Day of Peace. And it's really amazing having the giant peace dove puppets, because we get to see all the fun places that they go. And we've seen them in North Korea. We've seen them on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. many places around the world, marking the Day of Peace. So really incredible.
Thank you for your continuous work, Sean. We appreciate it. And for those who don't remember, Jane said one time from the dais, you know, we need some animal representation in this room. And I don't remember whether it was at that day. I think
I was just going to ask you to include that.
Yes. Deborah, why don't you tell the story? Because it's one that has to be added.
Jane said, you know, it's a pity that there are no four-legged ones in the room. So we got the idea to ask the security guards to bring in one of the UN dogs. And it was a huge surprise to Jane, and everybody just loved it. So that was it was just a perfect example of how not only were we able to expand the International Day of Peace through Jane's efforts to include the natural world, but also to have the student observance be a warm and inviting place for young people to learn about peace.
And it did get included in the program the next year, but the flexibility of the program at the UN is almost unheard of. So for Jane, things open. Sean, you have just done so much to bring her and Roots and Shoots and your talents and skills into expanding the International Day of Peace. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor and continues to be.
I think Brandon Perdomo is not in the room, and he wasn't sure. He might be in a little bit later. But he also was a representative of Pathways to Peace and wanted to have a few words to say about the International Day of Peace. We are moving a little bit ahead. There was one speaker who is Audrey Kitagawa in the room?
I don't think so.
Okay, she was going to be in around 10:30. I just want to see that some of the people in the room, I see that we have Joanie Ciadelli and David Wick and other people from Pathways to Peace, and it's wonderful to have additional Pathways to Peace people in this room. And as I've been rushing people through, I'm realizing we have a little bit of time. We are having a surprise guest at 11. Ben Bowler is supposed to be here with us to tell us, because for those of you who don't know, we are here in World Unity Week. And World Unity Week actually was kind of a bookmark between two UN days, World Interfaith Harmony Week and the International Day of Peace. And the International Day of Peace is near and dear to Ben and to World Unity Week and to Unity Earth. So it's important that we know how connected the International Day of Peace is beyond September 21st. That Peace Day every day is something we are going to be putting into our hearts. So I am going to continue here. And
so Monica,
yeah.
Do we have time for Jennifer to take another few minutes?
And as long as Taiwu is not in the room either.
Okay.
We had a message coming from South Korea, because the South Koreans, as Avon mentioned I'll just give a little clip on him before I do that. As Avon mentioned, the resolution came out of a university president's meeting, brought to the General Assembly. The General Assembly then looks at it and passes it through unanimously. But at that time, there was a university president from South Korea. So South Korea has been involved in the International Day of Peace. And there is a wonderful group that has been organizing annual events. The Korean Organizing Committee for the UN International Day of Peace has been very active and does a wonderful conference each year. And so I just want to honor that group as an Asian partner who's taking it and bringing together Korea and Japan students and Japanese students, Korean and Japanese students, and bringing together leaders to really address the International Day of Peace regionally and globally. And it's a good reason to bring Jennifer Kim back right now to talk a little bit more, because she has worked with Tai Wu on the last year's committee and is continuing that work. And so maybe you would just say a few more words here, Jennifer.
Thanks, Monica. I appreciate it. You know, I just kind of said a quick hello before because of time, but what I really wanted to tell you was the story of how I got into this and where Peace Day came about in our city of Chicago. And so in 1978, I just happened to get into a class that was taught by the late founder of the Peace School. And pretty soon I was volunteering and taking all kinds of classes and being there as often as I could. Among other things, I was doing his training course in peace breathing and exercise for nursing home residents, which was something very ahead of his time that he designed. And so in one of those classes, this was in the summer of 1978, he said, we're not going to have class today. We're going to have a meeting about creating Peace Day in Chicago. So that's where the planning started, right there in that class. And he and his son, who the leadership of the school, took us, you know, a group of inexperienced volunteers, and he wrote to the mayor. The mayor agreed and proclaimed Peace Day in Chicago. He asked for a minute of silence for peace, and the mayor included that in the proclamation. And we put on an event downtown that year, the very first Peace Day celebration. So since then, we have held annual Peace Day events in our city. Of course, he was absolutely elated when the UN created the International Day of Peace, because that was his dream, his wish, that there would be a day that was recognized globally to honor peace and activate peace. So, you know, we became a peace messenger organization, I think mainly due to those many years starting in the 70s, when we wrote to mayors and governors across the country, trying to get them to proclaim Peace Day, and wound up with every single governor, over 540 cities that issued and sent us copies of their Peace Day proclamations with that minute of silence for peace within them. So, you know, I really, like I said before, I owe where I am now to that founder of the Peace School. He was someone that really taught us that we are the peacemakers. We can't wait for anyone else. And it got me this chance to meet all of you. So thanks for giving me this extra minute. I appreciate it, and love to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate that as well. I'm going to have the good fortune to introduce Joanie Ciadelli. Joanie, I am so excited that you're here with us this morning. You've been with Pathways from the beginning. Want to hear your take on the International Day of Peace and what it's meant to you over all these years.
Thanks, Monica. It's so great to see you and all the other participants. It's very exciting. And I met Avon in the 70s. We were both in marketing careers, and she was very helpful in my career. And when I left the corporate world, she was right there to tell me about her vision for Pathways to Peace. And we began working together and as a nonprofit, and our main purposes were to expand the comprehension and expression of peace and peace building practices, to build cooperation by uniting the strengths of existing organizations along 8 paths to peace, and to contribute through consultation and direct participation to the evolving role of the UN and to citizens' worldwide participation in the International Day of Peace each September. So it was very much our focus. And we picked up the commitment to spread the word about Peace Day, and we actually brought together peace messenger organizations around the world. And this was before the internet. We collected their stories of what they were doing on Peace Day and presented them to the United Nations. And it was an extraordinary opportunity for me to learn about peace
building because it was not something that I had worked on before. And Avon was an extraordinary mentor for me. And through that, we got to interview peace messenger organizations in Sochi, Russia, and at the UN, and learn about all of the activities around the world. And it was wonderful to hear about the peace doves because I was there at the UN when the Share the Spirit of Peace was happening, and the peace doves were in room 4 at the UN. And one of the things that Pathways did, we had a man named Melvin Weiner who worked with calendars around the world, and he got Peace Day on millions of calendars around the world on behalf of Pathways to Peace. And so that was part of the extraordinary expansion of the Peace Day. And it's been an extreme privilege to work with Avon over these many years. And we're actually writing a book about our 40 years plus working with peace prevailing on earth. And she has been an extraordinary mentor for me. I keep saying extraordinary because it has been. And her heartfelt participation in my life as my sister, my adopted sister, has been unprecedented and has framed the work that I've done for these many years to bring peace in as many ways as I can. So I think that's enough to say. We've been working to realize your pathways to peace. And it's a great joy to be here today on this beginning of this time before Peace Day. Thank you.
Joanie, thank you so much. And for mentioning Melvin, that was in my notes as we started this as such an important part of the history. For years, Avon and others had said, if it was really marked someplace where people would see it. And now I won't buy a calendar if it doesn't include the International Day of Peace on it on the 21st. And you would be amazed at how many calendars beyond the group that Melvin worked with who use the International Day of Peace on calendars now. That was a major gift from Pathways to Peace to the day. Go ahead.
And
Joanie.
one other thing, we got in contact with the Unity Foundation in Kansas, Missouri, and got them to put the International Day of Peace in their daily word, which is read by people all over the world as their daily message.
Well,
We
how
continue to do
appropriate
that.
for Pathways to Peace to plant it both in the realm where you scribble any appointment, but into the prayer calendars of so many. Thank you, Pathways to Peace. And speaking of Pathways to Peace, I'm going to see if David Wick would like to join us. We're glad that you could be here.
Well, thank you. And what a true joy. Hello, Jennifer and everyone. Great to see you. And what a wonderful gathering, and also a recording of this history and of what has taken place. And I've been with Pathways and Avon since 1980, and I think a little before that. But I think what is very striking with me right now, because in the very beginning, Avon mentioned about how it was formulated in 1981 with the agreement. And then it was in 1984 when we really had the focus in San Francisco. But we go around talking to people to get involved with it. They go, "What's that? Why do we have that?" What, I mean, it was unknown. And the event in 1984 was a huge deal in San Francisco. And I-Magnin stopped their cash registers at 12 noon, and there's a minute of silence. There's even a television station that the KRN TV, it was the, I think it was NBC affiliate, but they stopped their programming for 1 minute at 12 noon, and there was silence, and just had the scrolling information about the International Day of Peace, which is probably the first and only time that's ever happened. but thinking about from those beginnings to where we are now and how that's happened. I mean, it's become a global event and growing, and it must grow. I mean, we've done wonderful things, but in our world today, how does this inspire others to take not only a day, but also ongoing, peace in every day, as we said. And a big part of that clearly is Avon, because she has, since she was a child, she had the vision, but it's how to manifest the vision, how to hold that vision and inspire others, and with love and with great compassion, but with great strength, because it was a continual, persistent presence that she brought that all of us could talk about. So I'm just delighted to be part of this celebration, and I say thank you, Avon, dear sister, and to everyone else that and the persistence that we've all had over the years now as we talk about that. So it's a joy to be here and acknowledge this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm so glad to have you. And for those who know David now, his activities with Rotary and bringing Rotary more into the International Day of Peace celebration as well. We want to thank you for your continuous work on not just the International Day of Peace, but truly on building Peace Day every day. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there's another person from Pathways to Peace that I haven't seen in a long time, but I see her in this room and it might be putting her on the spot. Marilyn King, would you be willing to join us for a few minutes and share, as an Olympian, Pathways to Peace that got you involved with talking about peace and the International Day of Peace? I don't know if Katie can find you in this room to bring you up. Marilyn, welcome. I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot, but I just want to say thank you for being with us, and maybe you'd like to share something about what it meant really talking from your podium to peace.
Well, thank you. You have put me on the spot. I had no idea that I would be here, but it is an extreme privilege to be with this group. From when I was first invited in 1983, thank you, dear Avon, to be one of the presenters in San Francisco, I knew that this was perhaps the most important day on the planet, that there could be a day devoted to learning how to think about peace. And from my perspective, the same way that Olympians think about gold medals. And the work over the years to bring these things together, to bring the visibility and the credibility of Olympians, to speak to how important your mindset is, that to take a deep breath, to pause, and to envision our collective goal of living in a world at peace has been a great privilege and continues to be the most important work that I'm engaged in with the team that I see assembled here today. Thank you for inviting me to say hello and to be present.
Marilyn, this is such a wonderful opportunity and collective gold. You know what? All of us on this call have been so involved with the International Day of Peace that idea of a gold medal accomplishment in not only that which we've done, but that which we've put a foundation for as we go forward. It's just very exciting. And I'm seeing some other people that had no idea I might call on them in the room. And there are a couple of people I just want to check. I did not see Audrey Kitagawa yet. Or what I'd really like to do is, Dot, should we just see if there are a couple more people to do it so we can have
Yes,
some more
please.
history?
Yes, please. And yes, we just
I
need a few
don't
more
know
minutes.
how many people are, if you're willing to say something about the International Day of Peace, maybe you would put your camera on now, because I realized that I called on Marilyn without giving her any advance warning. So I really don't.
Well, Anne has her camera on. Maybe
Anne,
she'd like to share.
would you like to share something about the International Day of Peace? Oh, she's she's pointing about hearing. I don't know Tammy Briggs, but I see her on here with her camera.
There she is. There's Ann.
Oh,
Hi. Sorry. Yeah, I'm happy to say something. I was so happy to see Lisa and Katie here, both from Philadelphia, that, I was part of the original group with Lisa that founded, got Peace Day Philly going, and listening to everybody here. And Katie lives in my town. And as you know, Katie, we put a peace poll up 13 years ago, and it created a huge confrontation and conflict in our town because it was right when the Iraq War was going on. But we resolved it. And now we're going to hopefully maybe have a rededication of it this year. So that's all I like to say.
And I had cut Lisa off a little bit because she is going to be talking later. But Lisa, I want to bring you back for just a minute to thank you for something that I don't even know that you would have even reported. And that is Lisa has written to the state legislature in Pennsylvania annually to get them to declare the International Day of Peace as a special recognized day by the state legislature. So I want to start there by saying thank you, Lisa. And if there's anything more you'd like to add.
Yeah, I would say that we've reached out to the mayors of Philadelphia. There are 2 mayors now that have supported Peace Day Philly and the International Day of Peace. And, it was kind of daunting in starting it to think about reaching out. And you were one of the original members of the small group, small but mighty.
That's right.
And we were able to, get mayors to our programs and get mayors to share a statement of support every year. And for me, that was just an idea of practicing getting to yes, that it's an opportunity for officials to really stand in peace and to see themselves as sort of encouraging peace within their city, within their community, within their state. So that's been a really interesting part of our history. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
I would just like to add that one of my biggest thrills, my husband made this huge Jane Goodall peace stove for the first year that we were in Philadelphia. And it was like so much bigger. I mean, he always does things bigger than he starts out to do. And it was very hard for us to store it every year. And I was so glad when we could pass it on to Lisa that now you have the peace stove in your wherever you put it.
We do. When we bring her out every year, we're so pleased and so grateful to Dennis for having created her. And yeah, we bring her with us especially for the September 21st program.
That's great. I love the little interchange. Thank you both, Ann and Lisa. Before I turn it back to Tez, there's one person that has been behind the scenes, not just today, but through every International Day of Peace that I've been involved in. Dave Willard, would you like to say something about the International Day of Peace and what it means to you?
Yes, sure, Monica. I know what it feels like to be put on the spot by this woman, so I'm always prepared. Interestingly, I think the biggest impact for me is the actions that people take. So whether it's the resolution itself, the calendars, the peace polls, the writing to the public officials, just the ways to make the spirit of International Day of Peace better known to everyone. I think that's what we all walk away from these programs with the intention to do. So I am prepared. We were in the Vince Lombardi Service Plaza on the New Jersey Turnpike on Sunday evening, and I'm going to read you 2 Vince Lombardi quotes that I thought were quite appropriate. First one, individual commitment to a group effort. That is what makes a team work, a company work, a society work, a civilization work. Second one, success is based upon a spiritual quality, a power to inspire others. And I think that's what you've been talking about on this program. Last one, when I wasn't preparing for this with Monica yesterday, I was working on our church website. So I happened to see the pastor's sermon from Father's Day, and he said, small things done are still better than great things planned. So every small thing adds up.
Dave, you're always impressive.
I know I'm going to be put on the spot, so I try to be prepared.
Thank you. There's some other people in this room that Avon has mentioned to me, but I just want to be aware of the timing. I don't know that Ben is one of them. Is he yet? Dot?
Ben is, I believe, in the room, Monica, but I was wondering if we had one moment for Alan to come in. He has a long history.
Go for it, Tez.
Just Alan, would you be willing to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a real honor, pleasure to be on the council for a number of years. Certainly has influenced very much my work with all kinds of organizations, because that's my world. And now that I work mostly with elders nationwide and the Elders Action Network, the idea of peace coming through elders is a very important aspect to me. So that's what I would say. And thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for joining us.